information provided in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Viewers should use their own discretion and consult with a healthcare professional for personalized guidance and recommendations. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, and we're thrilled that you are here today joining us. And no matter where you're tuning in from, what avenue, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We would love to stay connected with you. Today, of course, as always with all of our episodes, it's all about engaging conversation in developing that health and wellness and empowering that transformation. So as we're diving into things, just knowing that we're moving towards the end of the year, or maybe it's the beginning of the year if you are tuning in with us. And as we are discovering ourselves, at times it's important that we tap into that motivation. And sometimes it can be a challenge. And so this is where an episode like today's allows us to take away those gems and apply them to our lives so that we can keep consistently reaching for our goals. And so it is most appropriate to introduce my guest to you today. Her name is Danielle Brazant. And Danielle is a speaker, a writer, and a presenter who suffered a traumatic brain injury in a near fatal car accident. In 2018, she self-published her book, Maximizing Your Potential: How to Start the Journey Towards True Happiness in Life. So now she teaches others the lessons she's learned, overcoming tragedy and discovering triumph in the wake of the brain injury that caused unbelievable pain and heartache and almost led to suicide. We're going to talk about all of this. First, allow us to bring up and introduce Danielle Brazant. Danielle, it's good to have you.
Hi, thank you, Adriana. Thank you so much for having me. And wow, you said it beautifully. Like I even want to hear myself speak after that introduction. So
Well,
thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be a guest. I love what you're doing. We connected on social media in the spring, I believe it was late spring, and I've just been watching you. We're both very busy, but I love what you're doing with the affirmations that you provide for women and your health revolution. I love it, and I'm honored to be here today.
And you definitely bring the receipts, and you've been through a lot, and you certainly are in a position to speak to so many people, to their hearts, and where they're able to lead themselves to greater goals. Let's talk about some of what brought you to this point where you are in life. Tell us a little bit about you, your backstory, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Well, my story really begins where everything almost came to an end. 2012. I was driving home from church. It was a Sunday. And my life changed forever because it almost ended. I was in a near fatal car accident. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. And before they could even load me onto the ambulance, I did a podcast interview with the woman who saved my life, my guardian angel, police officer here in the city where I live, Michelle Smothers Omar. She had to administer CPR to my unconscious body before they could even put me in the ambulance because I had gone into cardiac arrest after I suffered the traumatic brain injury. So multiple things happening, multiple miracles allowed me to survive that day. And wow, they restored oxygen to my unconscious body, and I started breathing on my own because there was no respirator there at the scene of the accident on the highway. I started breathing on my own, she said, within a minute and a half of permanent brain damage before my body would have gone into shock because of the lack of oxygen could have lead to multiple things like organ failure. Before all of that process began, I started breathing on my own. The CPR worked, and they put me in the ambulance, and I drove away into an uncertain future. But looking back on it, I'm grateful for that experience. I'm grateful for even the brain injury because it has led me to where I am today. And that's on the journey to my dreams.
You know, and I can't even begin to imagine the type of, now I've been in car accidents. I've been in a serious one, but not as serious as how you're describing to us what you've gone through. Talk to us about the recovery process and what the beginning stages were, and at what point did it come to fruition for you that this was going to be a long road to recovery at the time it happened?
So there were two parts to my recovery, and the easier part proved to be the medical recovery. I learned to walk again, to chew solid food, because I had to start from ground zero. When you mess with the brain, that's the body's computer, the master board. So the motherboard, it controls everything. So traumatic brain injury, I had to start from scratch. I relearned how to walk. I had feeding tubes at one point, so I had to relearn how to chew solid food. I was getting baby food until about my second week in the rehabilitation center. I relearned how to walk, read, chew solid food, and then speech. I had to go through speech therapy. And luckily enough, the medical recovery what proved to be the easier part, because that stuff came back to me quickly. It's like my body, my brain knew that I had already learned it, and it just had to just get a signal, just get enough remembrance. And I had wonderful therapists, and they were able to unlock everything pretty quickly. And I relearned all that stuff uh, pretty quickly because I had already learned it. And luckily, my brain was able to access the memories of what I had learned before. So I was really, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, talk to us a little bit more about the support that you had back then. Obviously, you know, the rehabilitation team that was surrounding you. I can see how they were instrumental in helping you heal. What helped you? What was the critical component for you to keep leaning forward and keep striving to improve and be better than yesterday, physically and emotionally?
Thank you. Because, like I said, the medical recovery was the easier part. What came after, and what was far more difficult, what led to me becoming almost suicidal at one point, was the professional and the emotional recovery. Just getting back on my feet again, re entering the workforce, all of that. It was very difficult. It was very hard. It was very painful. At one point, I became suicidal. Doctors didn't let me work for a year. I was under doctor's restrictions. And then after I tried to get a job again, just anything, it was hard. People looked at me and said, first question in every interview, oh, so why haven't you been working for a year and a half? And when you try to explain it and say, well, I had this accident, but I'm okay now, it's just like dead silence. It was very awkward and it was hard. And the support system that proved to be instrumental was family. My brother found me, because when there is a will, there is a way, always. And my brother was able to find me a job I was able to do. It was in food service, which, for all its wrongs, is very easy with experience. I had been a food service manager, very easy when I was 18. So very easy to enter that segment of the workforce. They're always often shorthanded. So he found me a job as a shift manager at a local coffee breakfast shop. And I was able to re-enter the workforce. And from there, just everything kind of snowballed. And I was able to get back on my feet again and start chasing my dreams again.
What was the dialogue back then about your prognosis, and how did your family help guide you to keep being positive during, I'm sure that there were uncertain times of how quickly you were able, the rate of rebounding and rehabilitating. What was the dialogue like that helped you keep leaning forward?
So the very first diagnosis I got was uncertain, and uncertainty in the medical community can often be grim. So when my parents got to the hospital, when my emergency contact on my car insurance was actually my grandmother, and the police notified her, and my grandmother actually is the one that notified my parents and everybody next of kin. So the first diagnosis, day one, after everybody had been notified, was uncertain. And because they had that uncertainty. Doctors don't like being uncertain. They want to prepare you for the worst. So it was grim. They told my parents they don't know if I were to wake up and how long it would take. And when I did wake up from unconsciousness, what I would remember. And there was a chance I could be a vegetable. I may not know how to talk. I may not know anything. Yeah. After they knew that I wouldn't die, because that was probably within the first half hour when I was out of danger of dying. I would say in the first half hour, they didn't even know if I would live. After that, they just told my parents anything could happen, and we don't know if she's going to wake up, and when she wakes up, what she's going to remember. There was so much swelling on my brain. They had to wait for the swelling to go down, and they didn't want me waking up too soon. So at one point, I was unconscious, just in a coma-like state. Uh, my medical records say just in a coma-like state. And then at one point, the doctors had to give me medications to keep me unconscious because they didn't want me to wake up just too soon and just give shock to my body because there was so much swelling on my brain. So they just didn't know. And because they didn't know, they told my parents anything could happen. And I may be a vegetable for the rest of my life.
So, but they were able to stabilize your health, and they knew that your vital signs were holding.
Mhm.
So they knew that at this point it was a wait and see
Mhm.
situation.
Yes, ma'am. Pretty
And
much. Go ahead.
and what was the demeanor your parents had? Were I guess the words I'm trying to find is did they automatically feel this amount of resilience that she's going to pull through? Did they have to, were there things that they did to help keep things positive, to keep the family glued together for your support?
My parents are kind of old school, tough love sort of people. And I think in that moment, like I said, I wasn't there consciously, but I think from the stories my siblings have told, it's just they reacted like they usually reacted to everything. My mother, of course, reacted like a mother. She was distraught. She didn't know what was going on, just always calling the doctors, asking the doctors questions. And my dad was just very how he was. And my father had, may he rest in peace, he passed away in 2020. And he was very stoic, was the rock. And I was always a daddy's little girl growing up. And the nurses told me, this touched me when I woke up. They said your father refused to leave your bedside until about 48 hours. For about 48 hours, until there was no doubt that you would live, that we had you stabilized and everything. Your father just refused to leave. He was in my room at my bedside for over 48 hours. And that just brought tears to my eyes because dad was like that. I always knew my father loved me, but very stoic, he would not tell us as children, he wouldn't utter the words, I love you. It just very stoic, very old fashioned. Love was shown like it was in the ancient Greeks who had I think, the best understandings of love, agape, love that is demonstrated with action.
That's incredible. How long did it take for you from the point of when the accident happened to when you gained consciousness? What was that timeline? What did that look like?
So full consciousness where I could actually recall the memories, and I'm pretty much was on my feet again, was able to start relearning. That took about 2 weeks. Consciousness, in and out of consciousness, at first, like where I was opening my eyes, I think my family told me I started opening my eyes about day 4, day 5. I was opening my eyes, but I was just like a blank slate. They would wave hands in front of me and just nothing. I had no reaction, but I was conscious. I was breathing on my own and my eyes were open. I was like a shell. So about full consciousness was 2 weeks where I could start talking and recall memories and just function normally. That was 2 weeks.
Were you aware of the physical, of just the pain that you were going through, the physicality behind rehabbing from this accident? Were you aware of your injuries? Could you sense the in terms of sensory and pain? Were you able to get a gauge of what your rehabbing was going to, where you were at the beginning?
So until 2 weeks, the only memories I have of anything during that prior 2 week period is just flashbacks. It's just like a dream. I just remembered seeing faces. I remember my pastor at the time. I remember seeing his face, my professor, my brother. I see a faces, people looking at me. But like my family told me, they would come visit me in a hospital. My eyes would be open. The doctors were sitting me up, but they would wave hands in front of me. I just had no reaction. I couldn't yet speak. So my brain was still recovering. And a lot of that too, I'm not sure on what medications they had me on, because they didn't want me to recover too quickly because of the swelling on my brain. So
were you aware? Could you hear the dialogue? And when people were talking to you, that level of consciousness, being that this was how severe this brain injury was, could you hear and understand dialogue and voices?
I think I probably could, because if my eyes were open, my sensory skills were coming back. So I probably could hear. I don't remember hearing anything. The point where my brain was strong enough to where I could recall the memories of what I had seen, and I could consciously react to things, was 2 weeks. And that was 2 weeks later at rehabilitation, the On With Life Brain Recovery Clinic Rehabilitation Center in Ankeny, Iowa, where they sent me, one of the leading brain injury recovery units in the nation. And it's right in my own backyard. And that's where I was sent. And that's where everything started to fall into place. And that's where my memories were able to take place again. Because up until that point, I could sense things, because if my eyes were open, my sensory skills were there, but I just don't remember. My brain wasn't strong enough to access the memory of what it had seen.
How helpful, or let me back up a little bit. What were some things that were helpful from the rehabilitation staff, the team, that really resonated with you? What were some things that really helped you stay optimistic and stay focused on your recovery? The things that they did that were helpful.
I will say the thing that I enjoyed the most, the thing that I found to be most helpful and hopeful, was hearing the stories of other traumatic brain injury survivors. Every weekend, every Saturday afternoon, they brought in traumatic brain injury survivors, and they had those survivors just speak to us in small groups. And they spoke to us about their stories. And I was able to see people who looked like I do now on the surface, just looked like normal people that you would just run across every day, but who had gone through the same thing I was going through. And they were still able to function, and they recovered enough to where you wouldn't know. And that was very inspiring to me. And I remember hearing those stories and just subconsciously saying to myself, one day I'm going to do that. That's why I'm a speaker today. Like, one day I'm going to share my story so that I am giving inspiration to somebody who's going through something in their life as difficult as what I'm going through now. So I wanted to give that inspiration to other people, like those people inspired me.
And how long were you in rehabilitation? How long did you have to recover before you were able to come home?
So I still couldn't live with myself when they released me. I was under doctor's restrictions, but I was there in rehabilitation for about a month and a half. The doctors say I recovered, like I said, medically fairly quickly. I was walking, I was reading, I was able to chew food on my own. I would no longer needed a wheelchair. So that all came together in about a month and a half. And then I was released to the care of my parents. And that started the hardest part of my recovery, the most painful part.
Wow, that's incredible. We're going to definitely get to that. But first, we're going to take a commercial break. We will be right back after this.
Coming this spring, by popular demand, the second season show on the Tour of Love.
And the E360 TV platform is saying we want the Tour of Love.
With winner of the first Global Impactor Award, Tamara Hunter, along with Emmy-winning co-host Skip Thomas.
We are going on tour, on the road. It's time. Love unites, and there is healing through connections. This is a worldwide movement, the Tour of Love.
We're back here on the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison. And if you're tuning in live, you can always share with us any questions that you might have, any input that you definitely want to share. And of course, in the live broadcast, we are more than happy to share with you responses and comments, the back and forth. So we encourage you to continue to connect with us. Our guest today, we're spending some quality time with Danielle Brazant, a speaker, writer, presenter, who is a resilient traumatic brain injury survivor. And she's been talking about her journey from that fateful day and how things have turned around. And as we were segueing into this next segment, Danielle, I wanted to ask you, what was the most challenging thing about your rehabilitation from your brain injury? The most difficult, the most challenging thing as part of your journey?
Definitely, without a doubt, the most challenging part of my recovery was just the realization of all that I had lost, what had happened to me. I remember waking up every day in the rehabilitation center just thinking, wow, like literally 3 weeks to a month prior, I was supposed to be walking across a stage and graduating with honors to start studying for my bachelor's degree. I had a full scholarship to get my bachelor's degree from Northwest Missouri State University in the nearby state of Missouri. I was Phi Theta Kappa. I was student senator, class president, on the honor roll. I had everything. I was just so focused on just planning out everything in my life so it would be as perfect as I thought it needed to be. I just had all my goals, everything planned out, and fate had different plans for me. And the realization of what I was planning to what I was experiencing was the most difficult. I'm like, wow, am I even going to be able to work now? Like, am I even going to be able to just live on my own again? Those were questions in my mind. And I was only 24. I had just turned, a few weeks prior to my accident, I had just celebrated my 24th birthday, literally 3 weeks before the accident, just over 3 weeks. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, my life is all but over at 24. That was the most difficult thing by far in rehabilitation.
What kept you going during the times when you knew that you were getting strong? You were discharged from rehabilitation, and you're back home with your family, and you're still continuing to heal. What were some unexpected challenges during that chapter in your recovery?
The emotional, like I said, the emotional recovery and the professional recovery. I couldn't even work. So when I had just returned home, the doctors had given my parents orders. They didn't want me back in the workforce living on my own for about a year. They wanted to see how strong I was, how quickly my short-term memory recovered, because even though everything had come back to me, all my skills, all my abilities, I still was a danger to myself. I would do things like, my short-term memory was so bad, like there was a danger I could turn on the oven, and then go to bed. Like, they didn't want me living by myself. They wanted somebody there with me. And they didn't want me in the workforce because, once again, I could be a danger to myself with how bad my short-term memory still was.
And how?
Go ahead.
And how, as you talked about the emotional piece, obviously the emotions are all over the place, and you're processing. What helped you focus on the positive, or what were some things that allowed you to initiate reaching for the glass being half full, and leaning forward and looking onward and upward?
My father, actually. I'm not going to take all the credit here. So in that state, in that moment, I wasn't the Danielle that's before you now, the resilient, the one preaching about hope and moving forward. I thought my life was over. I felt sorry for myself and I was miserable. My father, I'll never forget this, may he rest in peace, like I said, passed away in 2020. My father looked me in the eye one day and told me, "You're still the same girl you were before this accident. You feel sorry for yourself and you don't think you can achieve anything anymore. But until you at least try to do the things and see what you're still capable of doing, and at least try to have your dreams again and make those dreams come true. Until you at least try, you don't even deserve to be happy." And I was shocked when my father told me that. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I was shocked. I started crying and I just couldn't look at him. And he refused to look at me. He just put his head in his newspaper after he told me that. And I started crying. And eventually, after several months, didn't happen overnight. It's very painful, very long. After several months, after things got very dark in my life, I became suicidal. Like I said, I'm just like, I can't do this. I should have died in the accident. I'm just going to finish off what fate should have. And I planned to commit suicide. I had planned to drown myself in a nearby lake to our house.
And I appreciate you sharing, and I'm so sorry for the loss of your father in 2020. And what can you share with us? What were some elements, the things? Obviously, his words of strength were some solid reminders to hold on to. Were there other things, other either tangible elements or just ideas or acts that you did to help you keep moving forward? Were there things that even in when you were struggling that you chose to look beyond and lean forward?
So what I can say, just everyday items, like thinking about the future at that point was just too painful. Just thinking about like what I could have done as to compared to what I could end up doing because I had lost so much. So thinking about the future just was not going to be helpful to me at that moment. I would say taking things, just waking up every day and just thinking about that day. I liked music. Music helped me get through a lot of days. I would just sit in a room and just listen to music. And that helped me get through a lot of days. Got my mind off of feeling sorry for myself, thinking about anything dark, listening to music, and just waking up every day, just taking every day, day by day. On Fridays, I saw a movie with my mother. I enjoyed doing that. We went out to eat sometimes, just taking everything day by day, not thinking about the future, not thinking about any plans. Just that helped. That helped me. And like I said, why I didn't end up committing suicide is because of my brother got me back into the workforce. Is very important. I don't want to leave it. I was making plans. I didn't tell anybody. So I was going through the motions. Just, I looked normal, but I was quietly making plans at the end of that summer when it got a little bit cooler and the water wasn't as hot. I was going to drown myself. But why I didn't end up doing that is because my brother actually got me back in the workforce. He found me a job and I now had hope and I had income coming in. And those resources eventually allowed me to get back on my feet and move away from my parents. And that's how I want to lay out for everybody.
So trusting the process and taking it a step at a time. These are some things that were instrumental for you to continue to improve and to grow with every single day. What are some things that obviously, those who, there are other people who are out there who have had loved ones, or maybe any of our viewers who are watching are connected with someone who has had a traumatic brain injury and obviously they all vary. What are some do's and don'ts that are important for families to understand that are helpful? And then what are some things we need to be mindful of that maybe aren't so helpful when someone's trying to heal from a brain injury?
I'll say most helpful thing, be supportive. Like I said, my dad, he eventually got me chasing my dreams again. But in that moment, I needed the tough love, but I also needed my brother's just unconditional love. I needed somebody who just was gonna help me and just say, "Hey, I'm here for you. I understand what you're going through." So it was both. I couldn't just like my dad's tough love in the wrong moment. Tough love may not be love. And eventually, like I said, I loved my father so much. I knew he loved me. But I came to his words. I came back to his words eventually after I was on my feet. In the moment, I just needed unconditional love of my brother. And I needed somebody to just help me just because I didn't see there was hope. So caregivers, like you want to push like my dad pushed me. Absolutely. But always remember that that person needs unconditional love too. They need somebody to understand what they're going through, how difficult it is, and to not give up on them while they're pushing them.
So also it sounds like it's also worth mentioning that as a brain injury survivor is healing, that maybe that there are some things along the way that how they're processing to might be helpful for family members and loved ones to not take anything personally, that perhaps actions or reactions to things, maybe frustration of just during that process, to not take things seriously or not take things personally. I should emphasize.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yes, that's so wise. Thank you for mentioning that. That's something that is doctors will tell you about a traumatic brain injury survivor, just the emotional and the psychological changes that they're going through. So I didn't have, thankfully, all too many. I've always been outgoing and I've always been fairly blunt. I get it from my mother. She's a New Yorker. That's how they are. So, but people who go through brain injury, doctors tell you they can have complete personality changes and they often lash out. They're often hostile. So you need to have love for that person really unconditionally, because sometimes they may tell you things that are not very nice. I never had any of those. Once again, I was with my parents. I just knew, I had to behave no matter what. Even with the brain injury, I knew I had to behave because I knew my parents. So they weren't even going to stand for that, even with the brain injury. Like I knew I had to behave. But a lot of traumatic brain injury survivors, they go through that psychological change and they often have personality change. Sometimes they get very hostile, very violent. I've had friends tell me stories of people they know who had the traumatic brain injury and then they ended up just lashing out at people. And so caregivers need a lot of education from the medical provider about the potential dangers and the risks that are associated with brain injury. And you just need to be aware and mindful that that person has gone through a traumatic change. Like I said, you just rebooted the motherboard. And we know what that does to a computer, and that's what it does to the human too. That's our motherboard, our brain. And when that's gone through a traumatic brain injury, just everything just gets rebooted and you don't know what's going to start back up, what's going to be a delay, we know what it, as the example with our own computers, let alone our bodies.
Do you think that there's enough emphasis on that? Because obviously for a moment that changes in time like this, it affects everyone, not just you. Obviously it affects your family, your friends, those who are part of your inner circle. Is that something that's often talked about?
There are a lot of brain injury caregiver support groups out there, but you're right. I don't think maybe caregiving and the caregivers of brain injury survivors, that probably doesn't get talked about enough, and it needs to, because the caregivers are just as important. Because without my dad, without my brother, I would not be here today. I would not be talking to you. I would not be successful. I wouldn't be a writer, a speaker. All that ended up happening because of the love of those people around me who were pushing me and who were also helping me.
What's your prognosis today? What have the doctors said about where you are physically speaking, how your body, your brain has bounced back? What have they noticed from that day to where you are today?
I'm sure medically, if a doctor were to do a CT scan of my brain, you'll see that I have had a traumatic brain injury. I'm sure there's some evidence on a scan or x-ray, but I go to my primary care physician every year for my annual physical, and she knows about what I've gone through. And at this point, they're just like, it's just a fact of your existence. It's just, there's no inhibitions, there's no limitations. And like I said, most people wouldn't know, even a doctor would not know I have suffered a brain injury unless I told them. So I'm just like anybody else. And that's something I say in my speaking. Everybody has something, whether it be physical, emotional, or whatever the case may be. Everybody has something in their life they have to overcome. And overcoming that challenge, that adversity, will make you stronger. It will make you better. And it will put you on the path toward becoming who you are always meant to be, toward true happiness, what my book lays out. And it starts with achieving a goal. It's a journey, and it starts with achieving a goal and then discovering your passion. After you find your passion, you discover your dream and you chase it for the rest of your life. And that's what I'm doing now.
When you had the opportunity to talk to the woman that you talked about who saved your life, what was that like?
Michelle.
Yes.
Officer Michelle Smothers Omar. Yes, we're still friends to this day. We just did a podcast interview a few months ago with another podcast out of Florida, I believe, the state of Florida. Yes, about that day and that incident. And we'll be friends for life. That woman is my guardian angel. And we actually met 5 years after my accident. We met, and we didn't even plan it. It just ended up being the 5-year anniversary of the day that we had first met, where my life almost ended and she saved my life.
Was it an impromptu meeting, or was it just, did you run into her, or was it something that ended up being planned on the fly, or what was that like?
It actually, she reached out to me on Facebook, and then I responded back. I'm like, yes, I would love to meet you. She saw what I was doing and she was proud of me and so supportive. And we met, and yeah, that's the real power of social media. I think it does a lot of harm. We know the negatives of social media, we all know now, but it's also that's the real power of it, though. It's also something that can connect people who would never meet again, potentially ever again. The power of connection that social media allows us in the 21st century, that's the real beauty and the gift, I think.
You are 100% correct. I want us to dive into your book. And first, we're going to take another commercial break. We will be right back here on the Health Revolution.
Life is so fragile, and we're constantly reminded just how fragile life can be, especially when we or a loved one is told we have cancer. Cancer survivor myself, I can tell you, we still feel very alone in this journey.
There's a study that's been shown that patients who are socially isolated have a worse prognosis, have a worse outcome than patients who are socially interconnected.
Buddies for Life is a non-profit cancer support group for those whose life has been impacted by cancer. Humor, hope, heart, and hugs.
Humor, hope, heart, hugs, and a whole lot of love.
Share this with your friends and family and support this community in every way you can. No one should face cancer alone.
I am a chemo buddy for life.
We are a buddies network.
No one does cancer alone.
Be a buddy.
And we are all here for you as a community of love.
We are chemo buddies for life.
And if you've heard 3 words, you have cancer, for yourself or someone else, you belong with us at Chemo Buddies for Life.
Healing through connections.
Back here on the Health Revolution, spending some quality time with my guest today, Danielle Brazant, a speaker, author, and presenter, and a traumatic brain injury survivor. And so, Danielle, you've been sharing your incredible journey, your road to recovery, and the resilience that you exude today. I'm going to talk about your book, and if we can bring up the slide here. And you mentioned before that in 2018, this was the book that you self-published. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about the book, and it was a labor of love. The title, like, lays out maximizing your potential, how to start the journey towards true happiness in life. And that's what the book is about. I don't focus too much about my accident. I didn't want that to be the only thing that people wanted to talk about me. I had hopes and dreams and goals, and I was still, like my father told me, I was still the same person. The accident was just something that I had to overcome, and the resulting brain injury. And that's what the book talks about. It talks about how everybody has something in their life that they have to overcome. Everybody, even people that seem like they have it all, like their lives are perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. Everybody has an obstacle, has a challenge, has something painful that you may not know. And everybody has that potential to overcome the challenge. And like I said before, overcoming that challenge makes you stronger. And it discovers the process of overcoming the challenge not only makes you stronger, you discover things about yourself. You find the passion, and finding that passion and that process of self-discovery will put you on the journey towards becoming who you were always meant to be. And that will lead to your wildest dreams. And that's what I'm doing now. That's the journey I'm on now. And it took the brain injury and the car accident that I had to go through to get on this journey. So it ended up, like I said, I'm grateful for everything I had to go through to get on this path, on this journey towards true happiness I'm on now. But look what it took. I almost lost my life getting on this journey. And for some people, that's what it takes. But everybody can do it, and everybody has something.
You know, they say that success is not necessarily as a person is on the top, but success is when you're going through the trenches and you are navigating through some really tough chapters in life. And you are, and I couldn't agree with you more on what you're saying. Yeah. Who is your book meant for? Who are you trying to share your story with your book?
So like I said, everyone has a story. And everybody has something, but we don't always know. People don't always tell you. Most people won't tell you. And you know what it is that you're going through. So it's intensely personal. So if I can speak to somebody, if my message is resonating with anybody, that's who the book is for. Because we won't always know on the outside, but that person that's going through that challenge, that person that is about to give up hope, that person like I was on the brink of suicide, that's who I wanted to write the book for, because everybody can get on this journey towards true happiness. Even if you think it's unreachable, like I thought my life was over. I thought I had nowhere else to turn. And that is probably the darkest place. And that's what led me to the thoughts of the suicide. It's the darkest place you'll ever find yourself. It's a place where you feel that there can never be hope. And that's where I was. And that's the darkest place you'll ever find yourself.
What are some takeaways that you believe that people maybe underestimate when it comes to the journey of becoming better than where we are today? What are some things that maybe some people just don't realize they can tap into that would allow them to grow and prosper and get beyond whichever situation has them where they are today?
Well, I think the biggest thing most people underestimate and don't realize at first is the length of time. Like my accident was, I celebrated the 13th anniversary this year, and my business and my success really started to take off within the last, I want to say 4 years. So that's 9 to 10 years. It's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. And a lot of people aren't willing to be miserable that long. And I'm going to be honest, I stayed in food service management for almost 10 years, 8.5, till I was able, I got an opportunity to where now I have my own business and I make enough of my money to make enough money from my business to be able to be flexible with my work schedule. And I still work in sales, but I have a flexible, very flexible schedule, and I can do and travel to where I need to go. I may be coming up, I may be going to England soon in the years to come for conferences, and I have a job that allows me to do that. That wasn't the case 4 years ago. So I had to do 8.5 years in food service management, working 50, 60, 70, 80. 1 week I worked, I think, 90 plus hours. And you have to do that.
That's intense.
Yeah, you have to be willing. But you see, I knew there was a goal. I knew I was writing my book. I knew I wanted to be a speaker, and I knew what I wanted to do. And I was willing to do it because I knew what it would lead to. You got to be committed to your goals. And I just saw a documentary. I am a nerd. I love documentaries. And there was a documentary of the founder, I think George Bell, the founder of Taco Bell. He went bankrupt, went belly up 3 different times. His wife divorced him, took the business the first time. Then his partner scammed him. He went bankrupt and was penniless and homeless 3 different times. And he just stayed committed to his goal and founding the restaurant, which was now Taco Bell. But that took failure 3 different times. He went bankrupt, and it took him 25 years. And he died a billionaire. Walt Disney was penniless, went bankrupt hundreds of times, and he died one of the 5th richest man on earth. And he was miserable, I would want to say, for about 30 years. Me, like I said, 8.5 years. People underestimate the time it takes, and they're not willing to just, that perseverance. I will say perseverance is something we're really missing in society. You got to persevere. You got to get through that difficulty. And like my father said, you don't have a right to be happy. You have to earn the right to make yourself happy. You got to discover your dream. Happiness is earned. It's not given. And you got to persevere to achieve it. And you got to discover who you really are and what you meant to be doing.
I completely agree. You know, we have to go through to appreciate the sunshine. There are times where the storms will come, and out of that, after the storm comes the sunshine in so many different analogies. And what do you have? So you mentioned that you're speaking in England. Are there
potentially coming up potentially because the England the original conference I was gonna go, I got my passport ready for this winter. I'm not going to that in person, but I'm exploring other virtual speaking opportunities in the UK, and that was just an opportunity that just developed to me. And within the last few months, some conferences have reached out to me over in the UK, and that's exciting. And yeah.
That's fantastic. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We will be right back after this.
Pearson here, host of Invisible Condition, where we talk about all the people who are living and thriving with all those conditions that you can't necessarily see from the outside. Join me every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time on E360 TV.
We're back here on the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, spending time with Danielle Brazant, speaker, writer, presenter, and traumatic brain injury survivor. Danielle, where can viewers find you if they're looking to get more information with all that you're involved in?
So yes, easiest way to find out all I'm doing, DanielleBrazant.com, www.daniellebrazant, my name.com. Go to my website. There you can buy a copy of my book. You can just even, Amazon allows you to just preview. Don't even buy it. Just read a few chapters if that's what you're wanting to do. I didn't write the book to make money. Like I said, I wrote the book to get my story out there, to give me the platform to become a speaker. And my speaking, like it has started to take off really in the last 2 to 3 years. And it's exciting. I travel the country. I'm pending in half a dozen conferences, over a dozen conferences in 2024. I have proposals that are pending, speaking proposals. So I may be coming to a city not far from you. I speak most of the conferences I speak at now are professional conferences. Like I spoke to the Midwest Tax Assessors Conference. I spoke on emotional intelligence, very important. I spoke to the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance Conference. I gave the opening day keynote this spring. So most of my conferences that I speak at and are professional. So I may be coming to one in a city near you soon. And I do, like I said, I'm a writer. So I'm often a contributor to newspapers, magazines, and I just became a contributor to a wellness blog, Christina Reese, out of California. She has a wellness blog that's going live this week, and my article will be live tomorrow, she told me. So it's Christina Reese, Inspired Living, her wellness blog. And like I said, I actually have a call today, I believe, about organizers, about potentially, this is on my bucket list of dream items, about potentially doing a TEDx talk coming up here within the next year or so. Not sure if I'll be able to do it next year, 2024, but maybe 2025. So that is on my bucket list, giving a TED talk. So I'm talking to organizers coming up actually at 3:00 today. I'm going to be talking about that. So the sky is the limit. Like I said, I'm on the journey toward my dreams, and the sky is the limit when you're on that journey. And like I said, I am based out of the Midwest, so I still have a day job in sales to where if I'm not speaking or I'm not doing an interview like I am today, I'll be at work. I'll be I love to work. It's a privilege at this point after being told that I may not be able to work. I love to work.
That's fantastic, Danielle. And I know we're running out of time. Yeah. I appreciate your time today in being able to talk with us. And you've been a delight to have and to share how resilient you are, especially with what you've been through. So I appreciate you spending time with us.
It was a pleasure. Oh, hats off to you too. You're on that journey towards your dreams too.
You better believe it.
Yeah, it was a delight. Thank you.
Yes. And for everyone tuning in, we want to remind you quickly that our website is www.thehealthrevolutiontv.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you have questions or info or in terms of if you have ideas that you'd like to see us cover on the show. We definitely encourage you to tap into that and to contact us on our website. And always know that we are here on the Achieve TV channel on E360 TV Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.